Chapter 751, In the Eye of the Storm. Do not underestimate yourself, little Tang, Gue Jianzhou shook his head. Perhaps your special medical skills would become an unconventional approach and the very reason to finally find a solution. That's right. I just had a new idea, we might as well experiment with it before those herbs are found and sent to you. Please do say. Gue Jianzhou explained his ideas, and the duo immediately started to experiment it. After a failure, they kept brainstorming, unceasingly doing experiments, proposing new ideas, and continuing the test on them and had more failures. Time passed by. The continuous research drained the duo, and as a cultivator, Tang Xiu was able to carry on the research for a long time. But Gue Jianzhou was quite old, and despite having paid attention to the training of his body all these years, he still had to stop due to fatigue. He then went to the next room to sleep for several hours. In the next afternoon, statistics on the deaths of the infected in Misty Source Island had been made. The number of infected who had died had increased to 562. At the moment the data was sent to Tang Xiu, MOR returned with the herbs needed. All the herbs have been found, boss. MOR put 2 suitcases in front of Tang Xiu and then wiped off the sweat on his forehead. Tang Xiu nodded and immediately began to refine the medicine. After refining for several hours, he successfully concocted a jet black pill. Under divine Dr. Gue Jianzhou's gaze, he grounded the pill and then sprinkled its powder on the carrion. This time, the carrion did not appear to decay and immediately festered, and yet, it still had little to no effect on the virus. I just found a black line on the carrion after you poured your medicine powder on it, little Tang. I used a magnifying glass to observe it, and it turns out that it's composed of countless very tiny active particles and seems like they are alive. From the Western medicine perspective, it can be called as a bacterium, said Gue Jianzhou slowly. Tang Xiu thought about it for a while. A bright idea suddenly birthed inside his head and he hurriedly said, if it's bacteria, or rather, viral bacteria, there are many ways to sterilize it. We can consider sterilizing it by using electric current. Sterilizing it by using electric current? Gue Jianzhou was stunned. He suddenly recalled something and then immediately said, there was an eccentric doctor in northeastern China 42 years ago. He was called Gao Yitong and invented this electric current sterilization method, using static electricity to encircle and suppress viral bacteria with the aid of alcohol and moxa stick. He eventually succeeded in creating this very special method after his study, and even though only a few people use this method in reality, it has been spread to some mountainous areas of the northeast region since. I say let's try it. Let's try it, then. Tang Xiu did think of testing it. What surprised him was that after the next carrion was brought and the static electricity method was used on it, the black lines on the carrion continued to burn, turning into a black smoke with pungent stench, while the piece of carrion itself gradually turned bright. Through the following study of Gue Jianzhou and Tang Xiu, it was found that the viral bacteria was unexpectedly suppressed. It does have an effect on it. But the fission speed at which the viral bacteria grow is too fast. Although this static electricity method can kill a large number of these viral bacteria, it will still be difficult to completely eradicate it. We can temporarily allay the death predicament for the infected by electrifying them. We can use this as a temporary suppressing action, said Gue Jianzhou excitedly. We need to find a living experiment. Also, it's necessary to generate static electricity into the human body without harming their health. Only then can we try to use it on all infected persons, Tang Xiu nodded. Yes. There were 4 commonly used methods in generating static electricity, which was electric charge migration, breaking electrification, induction electrification, and contact-induced charge separation. Among them, the most suitable method to be used on a large number of people was contact-induced charge separation, by using objects made of chemical fiber texture such as underwear, carpet, cushion, or wallpaper, whereby static electricity would be generated and induced after the contact and separation. Furthermore, household appliances also generated static electricity when used, or passed static electricity to its outer casing, such as TV screens or LCD. Huff. After studying this temporarily curbing plan, Tang Xiu did not hesitate to report the situation to Yang Chuxiong. After relaying the broadcast on TV, radio, and texts to mobile phones, the soldiers in the camp then rushed everywhere to spread the news. The third night after Tang Xiu landed on Mist Source Island, the virus crisis had been temporarily solved, while numerous people who were dying finally hung on the death line. The terrain of Mist Source Island had only 4 areas suitable for living, which were inhabited by the people who lived here for decades. There were also some villages on the hills, which, according to the official statistics, numbered up to 24 villages. Each village was inhabited by several hundreds of people at the lowest to several thousand people at the highest. Python City, Wolfpack City, Twin Brook City, and Mixed Summit City. The population of these 4 major urban areas, with the largest being Python City with 100 to 200,000 inhabitants and the smallest one being Mixed Summit City, with only 7 to 8,000 people. After decades of development, all 4 cities were now connected with many main roads, dozens of small roads, and mountain roads. Mixed Summit City. Traveling along the road was rows and lines of the neat and orderly hamlet and village buildings. The bustling commercial streets here were almost no different from the urban areas in the outside world. Though the place was placed under strict concealment, the state had been supporting it secretly, hence the continuous commodity and supplies shipped from the outside. The inhabitants who lived here not only had their foodstuffs provided by the government, but were also able to gather herbs, find minerals and other resources, and many even had their own private factories. On a certain street in the north of the city, dozens hardened robust men in suits crowded inside the 5 buildings, while many people came from various places and entered the 5 buildings in a rush. In the middle of the building, a high-ranking member of the Stygian Club, Keith Moore, was smoking the world's top Cuban cigar and sipped a delicious coffee while listening to a report from his confidant. The result of our investigation is that the person who invented the electrostatic treatment is called Tang Xiu. From our intel data, he's the secret boss of Magnificent Tang Corporation in China and is also hailed as the young divine doctor of the Chinese traditional medical field, but we haven't yet investigated the reason why he came to Mist Source Island. Furthermore, the electrostatic sterilization treatment can only temporarily suppress the virus, but he has yet to find a way to have it under control. As the matter stands, it could be said that he has helped our cause a lot, reported the thin middle-aged man. Keith Moore's eyes shimmered. He nodded and said, "You're right. We are the ones who brought the virus, but completely eradicating all the humans on this island is not our purpose. We did that just to ruin some people and then take control of a large number of people through their fear, so we can free them and drive them to work for us. Only, there's something problematic with the environment of this place that affects the multiplication of the virus outbreak that it finally, out of our control. Plainly speaking, the arrival of this Tang Xiu is actually a relief for us." "So, what should we do now, sir?" asked the middle-aged man. "Assign some assassination agents to abduct this Tang Xiu," Keith Moore touched his chin and coldly said. "He has an amazing talent given that he can think of this electrostatic sterilization method. Perhaps, he can be of some use for us later. Furthermore, we must not relax our investigation on the mountain ranges around Mixed Summit City. We have only prospected a small lithium mine here. The more mineral resources we find from the survey, the bigger the harvest we can get from the Chinese government when we negotiate with them." "Understood. I'll arrange it immediately. However, what should we do if Tang Xiu refuses and resists us?" asked the middle-aged man. "Don't kill him even if he resists," said Keith Moore. "He just needs a short time to find a way to suppress this darkening virus, so I'm sure he can develop a new type of darkening virus antidote. We will need a new darkening virus antidote after the negotiation with the Chinese government later." I understand, said the lean middle-aged man as he turned around and left. Keithmore's eyes followed the back of the middle-aged man as he left. Then, he clapped his hands as two young men in black trench overcoats and pale skin appeared in front of him. The two of you will follow Dark Soul Team. This Tang Xiu has an extraordinary identity and I believe the Chinese military will protect him. You will take over if the assassination fails. Understood. The two young men replied and their figures instantly disappeared. The valley dozens of kilometers south of Twin Brook City was a place of verdant and lush vegetation, with fresh wildflowers and animals everywhere. It was a picture of vibrant biological life compared to the heavy death qi and bleak atmosphere in Twin Brook City. And at present, there were dozens of army tents built there. A dark-skinned, foreign old man in a black tuxedo and with a walking stick made of gold was standing on a slope on the south side of the army tents. Behind him were two men and two women donned in black leather fur coats with sinister auras exuding from their bodies, existences that were out of line with the vibrant scene in the valley. Even some of the wild animals were avoiding them. Sue, how is the deployment of the virus gene conversion agents? The foreign old man suddenly asked. The man on the far left behind him replied in a moderate and somewhat hoarse voice, there's only the last step left. We can expect to have it mixed successfully within 3 days. The foreign old man nodded and then said, this fella called Tang Xiu does have some skills, much more capable than that group of idiots led by Keithmore. Now that our pyramid organization has set our feet here, we'll ruin the plans and scheme of the Stygian Club, hence we must be ready to have a full frontal clash with them. Send some men to harass and create troubles for them. They want to do some prospecting for mineral deposits here, but we will not let them do as they wish. I'll go and manage it at once, said Sir respectfully. The foreign old man touched his chin and said, after conveying my order, you will immediately lead some men to kill this Tang Xiu. He thought of and found the method to temporarily suppress the darkening virus. It may be a relief for us, but we must not let him find the means to fully cure the darkening virus and neither let him be caught by those Stygian Club's bastards. Let me do it alone, sir, said Sue with a hideous grin. Humph. The foreign old man hummed coldly and said, there's an old adage in China, caution is the parent of safety. You're a capable man, I admit. But don't let your arrogance rob you of your life. Chapter 752, An Accompanying Crisis. With Tang Xiu and Gui Jianzhou finding a method to temporarily suppress the darkening virus, the authorities finally earned themselves a voice to speak. Yang Chuxiong, who was the highest-ranked officer on Mist Source Island, excitedly ordered a celebration feast after several days of infection and the suppression of the darkening virus. At night, following the end of the celebration banquet, Tang Xiu decided to go out and have a stroll around, while also planning to see his female cousin, Tang Han, in passing. When he told Yang Chuxiong about his intention to leave the military compound, however, Yang Chuxiong opposed his idea strongly. The Mist Source Island is currently in a mess and very chaotic, divined Dr. Tang. Leaving aside the panic caused by the darkening virus, which has caused many pessimists to make troubles, just those foreigners alone are running rampant and harboring sinister and evil intentions. I'm afraid you'll meet troubles if you run into them. The order I receive is to solve the problem on Mist Source Island, and not just to study this disease outbreak. Division Commander Yang, if I keep staying here because of fear and danger, then tell me, what is the significance of the highest leader sending me here for? The highest leader? Yang Chuxiong was taken aback and his pupils suddenly contracted. There was also a horrified look in his eyes. Although he was ordered to assist Tang Xiu to solve the problems and crisis on Mist Source Island, he did not know specifically which top brass issued the order was. But at this moment, the very person Tang Xiu said, was simply a shock too big for him to accept. It's really the number one? Yang Chuxiong was silent for a while before he asked with hesitation. Yes. Tang Xiu nodded. With a complicated gaze, Yang Chuxiong looked at Tang Xiu and said, then I won't stop you since this is the case, but I must accompany you around. If you happen to run into danger. No. You need to stay here to maintain order, Division Commander Yang. Tang Xiu waved his hand to interrupt him. You can promptly dispatch troops in time in case there are troublemakers attacking the army. As for my safety, do you think that I have no real skills despite being valued by the highest leader? Tang Xiu's answer made Yang Chuxiong dumbfounded. He observed Tang Xiu for a long time before he smiled bitterly and said, I'm just afraid that if anything happens to you, even if it's under the order of the one, there's still Senior Tang. I can't afford to take the fury of Senior Tang. It was my grandfather who sent me over here. Besides, I'm already prepared to encounter any troublesome issues as well, hence he won't be troubling you, said Tang Xiu. Finally, Yang Chuxiong compromised, if I can't follow you, then allow me to assign some men to accompany you. Are still there soldiers in the army who can be assigned to follow me? Asked Tang Xiu. Yang Chuxiong's breath lagged and he smiled bitterly, you're right. All the troops are also infected by the virus now. Let alone acting as guardians, just not catching a fever is already good enough. That's right. Didn't the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad come with you? I'll just assign them to protect you. No. Tang Xiu, it's my decision. Else I will not feel relieved. Tang Xiu could only feel helpless inside. He could never bluntly tell him that he was an immortal cultivator, and neither could he say that 11 men he brought with him were all cultivators. After he learned of the threat of the various forces here, especially the Stygian Club, he had realized that the adversaries he would soon face were not ordinary people. If he were to encounter the Stygian Club's assassination agents again, adding 10 more Phantom Special Forces still wouldn't be able to protect him. They would just become burdens instead. Regardless, he could tell Yang Chuxiong's determination from his firm expression and could only nod, feeling a headache coming. Half an hour later, after 4 black off-road cars temporarily picked up by Yang Chuxiong arrived, Tang Xiu boarded it directly along with Immortal and the rest, while pretending to not notice the Phantom Special Forces that followed them behind. Any specific place you want to go, boss? Immortal was in charge of driving, so he asked after they left the military compound. Haven't you clearly investigated the island? Where's the most central site of Mist Source Island? Asked Tang Xiu. It was Zidane and Feng Yang who went there in person and fully investigated it, said Immortal. It's just over 100 kilometers north of Mixed Summit City, but despite the road connection between the 4 cities, we'll need to take a detour to avoid the mountain range. Also, it will take around 4 to 5 hours to get there by car. We don't have to hurry with those Phantom Special Forces members behind us, said Tang Xiu. But now, let's go there and have a look at first. Anyways, which car Zidane and Feng Yang are in? They are in the car right behind us, answered Mo. Stop to the side now, said Tang Xiu. Shui Sha, you will exchange cars with Zidane. I have something to discuss with him. Understood. Shui Sha, who sat next to Tang Xiu, nodded. Soon after, the lean Zidane rushed to sit next to Tang Xiu and then spoke after closing the door, Do you have something to ask me, boss? Yes. You and Feng Yang went to the mountain in the center of Mist Source Island in person. Did you see the palace on its summit? What is the situation there? Asked Tang Xiu. We did observe it with a telescope since we were far away at that time, said Zidane. We were indeed able to see the palace. It's not that magnificent and splendid, yet still gives off a majestic impression. Only, we were blocked by the heavy fog when we were just 600 meters away from the mountain. We then tried to advance forward for about 100 meters, but after we entered, we weren't even able to see our own fingers. Furthermore, there was also a particular kind of pressure blocking us, rendering us unable from continuing to move deeper. So to say, you couldn't even get inside? Asked Tang Xiu with a smile. Zidane forced a smile and said, Yeah, we couldn't get in. Though I know nothing about arrays, I've been following you for quite a long time, boss, hence I can judge that it was caused by some kind of array. For us to be able to venture 100 meters deep into that thick fog can be considered as a good result already. If it was an ordinary person who went inside, I'm afraid that they would be forced out by the pressure after they walked several meters inside. What's your take on this point of the situation? Asked Tang Xiu with a thoughtful expression. There's nothing but only one aspect, boss. Zidane immediately shook his head. We circled the mountain and found a nearby village on the southern side of the mountain, which houses around 1,000 to 2,000 inhabitants. We also sneaked into the village to observe and found foreign experts staying in the 3 directions of the village, east, west, and south, to be exact. They have unknowingly occupied several courtyards, which are tightly guarded. Also, there are some people stationed at the northern side of the mountain, about 100 people in total. Judging from their attire, they are highly liked employed mercenaries and led by a lame, old Caucasian man. Have you investigated their identity? Asked Tang Xiu. Other than the more than 20 people stationed in the eastern side of the village, I screened through the network and finally determined that they are from the Mexican Mafia syndicate, the Reston, and the leader is the Reston's second-in-command, a ruthless person called Shinlei Duomo. We have yet to investigate the other 3 forces since there are too few sources of information available here. People from the Mafia syndicate? Tang Xiu frowned. What are they doing on this island? Zidane did not reply. It was an issue he was unable to figure it out either. Early morning before dawn. Together with the 2 cars of the Phantom Special Combat Squad members, they arrived at Wolfpack City. If it was in the past, both sides of the road in Wolfpack City would have its streetlights brightly lit and illuminating the buildings in the surroundings. But it was different at this time. Both sides of the road were pitch black, and even though there was moonlight, they still appeared very dark. Only when they passed through the intersection did they finally see the functional traffic light that slightly illuminated the road. Regardless, normally at this time, a household may have turned off the lights to sleep, but now, every household had the lights on, and they could occasionally see through the windows some of the residents inside who hadn't yet rested. We're being watched, boss. While driving and watching the road ahead, a cold glint flashed in Moa's eyes as he reported with a vigilant look. Tang Xiu instantly released his spiritual sense to cover the range of 300 to 400 meters. There was a car that did not turn on its lights about more than 300 meters behind the 6 cars, while 2 people in black leather coats were watching them with a telescope on the roadside by the trees. Other than them, there was also a young man who was roller skating and moving forward at a very fast speed from the next street ahead. Tang Xiu could instantly tell that this man was definitely not ordinary. Even if he was an elite soldier of a special force, there was no way he could do roller skate at such a speed. Keep driving down the road and find a hotel, said Tang Xiu indifferently while continuing the surveillance with his spiritual sense. The hotels in the entire Mist Source Island have been closed down according to our information, boss. They only have a few staff now, but there is practically nobody staying there, said Moa. It's a given considering the current situation. I can understand that. But there will be empty rooms even if they can't provide services. We are going to spend the night here and hit the road again tomorrow morning, said Tang Xiu lightly. Got it. Grand Hyatt Hotel. It was the tallest building in Wolfpack City with 5 floors in total. Except for a small number of rooms with lights on, the other rooms were all dark. The glass front door of the hotel had been shut with a chain at this time and locked with a lock. There was not even a trace of humans in the hotel's lobby on the first floor. After the 6 cars stopped, Moa easily opened the lock on the hotel's main door. After pushing the door open, Tang Xiu and the others then set their feet inside under the weak light inside the hall. I'm going to find someone to open the rooms for us, said Moa after inspecting around. Tang Xiu raised his hand to stop him and lightly said, no rush. Everyone, get ready for combat. There's no need for us to shout. Some people will come down to greet us. In a flash, other than Mo Ao who stood vigilantly next to Tang Xiu, the other 10 masters of the everlasting feast hall instantly dashed to both sides to take cover. They wielded their sharp daggers while vigilantly watching the hotel's front doors and the corridors on both sides. Get ready for combat? The members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad looked baffled and puzzled. They did not notice anything in particular. Why would they need to get ready for the battle? Yu Shuqing was puzzled, but still, he quickly made a few hand motions as they loaded the bullets into their guns and scattered around. Chapter 753, One Move. In the dimly lit hall of the hotel, Tang Xiu stood right in the central spot with his eyes fixated on the hotel's front door. When 2 middle-aged men in black leather coats and a middle-aged man with a cold expression entered through the door, the guns of the Phantom Special Combat Squad's members were instantly aimed at them. Tang Xiu, Divine Dr. Tang. The thin middle-aged man in the leather attire on the left had long loose blonde hair. He straightly ignored the members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad who were aiming their guns at him and walked straight to the front, before he stopped about 7+ meters away from Tang Xiu. "Where are you from?" asked Tang Xiu indifferently. "You don't need to know our identity for the time being," said the lean middle-aged man. "There's only a clear point for you. Order these garbage men of yours to put their guns down and follow us alone. You will naturally know who we are when you come to our place." What absurdity. A bumptious, self-opinionated idiot, Tang Xiu sneered. "Don't tell me you don't know you have violated the China laws. You've committed evil deeds inside the territory of our country." The lean middle-aged man looked grim and sullenly said, "The law is nothing but shit before us. And do watch your mouth, Mr. Tang. Finding you this fast has explained what we're capable of. Now we are inviting you with courtesy to give you face. You Chinese have an old adage, refusing a toast will only make you swallow a forfeit. Hence, I hope you reconsider it, Mr. Tang." "Are you threatening me?" asked Tang Xiu. "If soft means fail, then we have no choice but to resort to hard means," the middle-aged man coldly replied. "But before that, I urge you to take this last chance. Follow us." Yu Shuqing was holding a gun and aimed its muzzle at the temple of the blonde-haired middle-aged man. While keeping his vigilance, he dashed to the front and said in a deep voice, "Mr. Tang will never go with you. Remember the consequences you will face first before you act." The thin middle-aged man turned to look at Yu Shuqing and observed him. He then nodded and said, "No wonder you have no fear, Mr. Tang. You turn out to have been protected by some masters. If I'm not mistaken, these men should be special soldiers of the Chinese military, right? Since you want to resort to force, how about having an appetizer? Let's pick one man from our side and let them have a spar with each other." With that said, he clapped and 8 men in suits with a saber on their backs dashed inside. A chilling aura was emanating from them as they quickly stood in a row behind the thin middle-aged man. Yu Shuqing himself could vaguely feel that these people were not ordinary. After pondering for a moment, he took a step back and said, "Gangzi, accompany them to play." This member of the Phantom Special Combat Squad was second only to Yu Shuqing in combat prowess. After handing over his gun to Mo Xiaonan, he lifted the other equipment on his body at a very fast speed. He twisted his neck and growled as he dashed a few steps forward and sneered, "Who's going to play?" The thin middle-aged man let out a mocking smile, raised his right hand and snapped his finger. The leftmost man in the row then stepped forward and came to Wei Qinggang's front and said in English, "I'm the weakest in my team, but it's still easy to pack you up. Come. Let me see the strength of a Chinese Special Forces team member." Wei Qinggang put on a combat stance and sneered, "Don't flap your tongue when you brag. Bring it on." Tang Xiu secretly shook his head. The Stygian Club definitely had numerous hidden masters under their flag. The assassination agents he encountered in Laoshan, Chengxi City, were all of the divergent races and possessed terrifying strength. This thin middle-aged man and the man next to him were similarly not human beings, and probably had very formidable strength as well. Each and every one of the 8 men under this thin middle-aged man also had a thick smell of blood with intense murderous intention, and soaring killing aura. It was enough evidence that they were very strong. At the very least, they were masters who had experienced many battles. As for Wei Changgang, he was not the opponent of that fella, not a chance. Tang Xiu, however, did not intend to warn Wei Changgang at all. He did not have a good impression toward these guys from the Phantom Special Combat Squad. Especially at this moment, as he had yet to speak, but Yu Shuqing, the captain, already jumped out and let his men spar with the enemy. It was simply stupid. At the same time, Tang Xiu also had another purpose. It would be best if all members of this Phantom Special Forces team got injured. In this case, they wouldn't be able to tail him around, hence they couldn't affect his actions and movements in Mist Source Island. At this time, Wei Changgang was full of confidence. He won the Military Regions Fighting Championship twice consecutively. Despite still taking the enemy seriously, he subconsciously refused to believe that he could not win against his opponent. Seeing that the enemy did not take the initiative to attack, he was also disinclined to launch a sneak attack as his feet dashed in an instant and swiftly delivered a fierce kick toward him. This kick would definitely kill or at least severely injure the enemy if he was an ordinary person. Too slow. The other party shook his head and snorted. He grabbed Wei Chenggang's bare feet and sent out a lightning-fast kick on the inside thigh of Wei Chenggang's another leg. His fist also pounded instantly and directly hammered Wei Chenggang's face. Bam! Wei Changgang, who was full of confidence, was kicked and flew backward by the opponent's punch. His body then flew towards a nearby wall. If it was not for his strong resistance, his opponent's heavy blow would have knocked him down already. Just one move. And yet, it had straightly decided the winner and the loser. The man spat on the spot where Wei Changgang had fallen with a disdaining expression. He did not follow up on his attack, and neither did he go for the kill. With disdain and contempt on his face, he returned to stand behind the middle-aged man, folded his arms, and did not spare Wei Changgang another glance. The other members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were dumbfounded. The expressions on their faces seemed like they just saw a monster. The whole team knew each other well and naturally realized how formidable Wei Chenggang's combat prowess was. But never did they think the other party would be able to defeat him in just one strike. Yu Shuqing was shocked. The other members of his Phantom Squad could not see the attack trajectory of the enemy, as they only felt that the enemy's speed was very fast with formidable strength. But he could clearly capture the trajectory of the enemy's attack and could judge the terrifying speed of the enemy. What fast speed and strength! No members of my Phantom Special Combat Squad can be his opponent. Even if I were to fight with all my strength, I may not be able to defeat this guy. Be it his strength or speed, he is way too strong. Yu Shuqing looked at Tang Xiu with an ashamed face. He had begun to secretly regret inside for jumping out too early to protect Tang Xiu. At this moment, only then did he realize that Tang Xiu did not even shout, neither did he say or expressed anything ever since he jumped out. Tang Xiu could grasp Yu Shuqing's mental state from his expression. After a moment of silence, he then said lightly, "Victory and defeat is a common occurrence to a military commander. The failure this time doesn't mean you will fail again in the future. As long as your ambition and spirit stay high, just continue to work, and then you can be sure that the day of victory will come to you sooner or later. Regardless of that, I'm the one who's in charge of supervising Mist Source Island. Hence, no one is allowed to jump out without my order anymore." "I understand." Yu Shuqing nodded with a bitter expression. Tang Xiu then looked the thin middle-aged man and indifferently said, "You want to have a spar first, so I'll accompany you to the end. Shui Sha, go play with them." Shui Sha emerged from the corner of the corridor and instantly appeared beside Tang Xiu. He cupped his fists and walked to the center between the two parties. Then, he grinned evilly and said, I used to commit senseless killings and slaughters in the past. I always felt that it was very boring. Never did I think that I would meet these many masters to play with today. Hey, you, the brat from before. Come here and let's play some. The lean middle-aged man snapped his fingers toward that man again and indifferently said, the final time has yet to arrive, so there's no need to kill out of anger. Still, don't be merciful. You don't need to kill him, just hit him enough to make him severely wounded. Understood. The man responded and stared at Shuaisha in contempt as he then sprinted in the blink of an eye. In nearly a flash moment, he had dashed right in front of Shuaisha as he slammed out his palm all of a sudden, trying to slap Shuaisha's forehead instantly. Too slow. Shuaisha mockingly snorted. His figure instantly turned into a shadow. Before the man was able to take his strike back, his palm already pierced Shuaisha's illusory image. His expression slightly changed after his sure hit strike missed. As he was about to prepare the second strike, a pair of slapping palms he could not see suddenly smashed him to the floor. Following that, Shuaisha seemed to send a light kick to the man's abdomen, sending him to paddle and sweep the floor, as he then kicked the other side of his waist. A single move. It was similarly one move, and Shuaisha had inflicted heavy losses to his opponent. As the man's body swept the floor backward for 7+ meters, he finally hit the lower part of the wall, badly hit his head, and straightly made him faint. What? The lean middle-aged man and his other comrades had their expressions turn extremely nasty. It was as though they had eaten a dead fly, nearly driving them crazy. Nonetheless, they also realized how terrifying Shuaisha was at this moment. As for the Phantom Special Combat Squad, Mo Xiaonan was rendered speechless and dumbfounded when he saw Shuaisha take care of his opponent in just one move. He looked at Wei Qingguan, who was already up, and trembled. Suddenly, he elbowed Chen Yongfan and spoke in a toned-down voice, "Tell me that I'm just dreaming, will you?" "You're not dreaming. It's all real." Chen Yangfan gripped his fists tightly, and there was a frantic expression in his eyes that fixedly stared at Shuaisha. The others, however, had a disbelieving look along with deep admiration and respect in their eyes. They had never expected that Tang Xiu's subordinate was able to stand up and even defeat the enemy. Mo Xiaonan pinched his own thigh. He then shuddered and muttered to himself, just a while ago, Gengzi was defeated by him in just a move, but that expert who defeated Gengzi with one move turned out to be defeated by Tang Xiu's subordinate with one move also. This? What does tit for tat mean? It just shows that if Tang Xiu's men want to hit Gengzi, it's akin to just pinching an ant, no? Shuaisha, however, looked a bit regretful when he saw his fainted opponent. He immediately turned to Tang Xiu and said with a smile, "Boss, since they want to pick a fight with you, I might as well clean them up first, don't you think? Else, it will be annoying if these flies were to gather around us." Chapter 754, Weird Change. A smile formed on the corner of Tang Xiu's mouth. How could he not understand Shuaisha's intention from his words? It was indeed necessary to remove these fellas at present, but the most important thing was to make the Phantom Special Combat Squad leave. Else, once the non-human beings from Stygian Club appeared, it would be inevitable for them to expose their identity as immortal cultivators. "You can make your move if they have the guts, Shuaisha." Shuaisha smiled and nodded. Then, he looked at the Stygian Club's people and proudly said, "My boss says you flies are very annoying. If you want to show off, you had better grab those eggs in your crotches, for I alone will deal with all of you." The lean middle-aged man's face turned grim. A ruthless glint flashed in his eyes as he fixedly glared at Shuaisha. He was of the werewolf lineage and naturally had great inborn strength. Other than his fellow masters, the remaining 7 of his subordinates were all human beings. Although they practiced a strange cultivation system, they were not that strong. They might not face any problem in dealing with ordinary humans, but they would only be beaten once they encountered a genuine powerhouse of the divergent races. Nevertheless, he had his own pride, and he would never allow his subordinates to become tortoises. This fellow called Shueisha may be strong, but this didn't mean his 7 subordinates were unable to fight him head-on if they were to join forces. Kill him. The lean middle-aged man clenched his fists and shouted. The Stygian Club's experts had their spirits immediately soared after hearing his order. The moment Shueisha threw out his arrogant remark, their hearts were already filled with murderous intention, wishing to kill him. Whoosh! The 7 people dashed forward and instantly pulled the sabers on their backs from the scabbards. Their movements were in good formation, and the sharp, cold blades filled the air with a chilling atmosphere. Shueisha slightly knitted his brows. Despite his boldness stemming from his superb skill, he still maintained his vigilance. The everlasting feast hall had its own unique battle formation, but it needed many people to cooperate for it to be able to show great might. The 7 people in front of him had outstanding teamwork and understanding, and it was highly likely that they also knew the force-joining array. 7 stars rapid succession. The footsteps of the 7 people suddenly moved. Along with the sound of hissing between their teeth, their figures turned into shadows and instantly shrouded Shueisha. At first, their speed was not very fast, but along with their cooperation, their sabers continued to collide while the palms of their hands patted the shoulders of their comrades. The order of the trajectory and direction was exactly the same and consistent, therefore increasing their speed a lot. You need to coordinate external force and cooperate with your partners, huh? Shueisha raised his brows, his solemn expression suddenly changing. Smile inside, he instantly released a dart at one of them and accurately hit his saber. In other words, he just took down one of them and created a flaw in the battle formation that increased their strength. Break. Shueisha's figure was closely followed by the shadows. The dagger in his hand swept away along the battle formation's flaw. Using the technique to smartly use a small force to weather a much powerful force, he made 2 sabers bounce, while the dagger in his hand was as though alive as it moved in an uncanny trajectory and struck the left ribs of one of them. Arg! Right as a shrill scream sounded, 2 lines of blood appeared on the neck of the other 2 men, as blood then crazily squirted from the opening slits. Shueisha was like a tiger in the middle of a flock of sheep. His dagger kept flying while creating shadows of blood on its track. He had already suppressed his speed, and yet it was still twice as fast as the people from the Stygian Club. In combat among experts, a nearly double speed advantage inevitably created a one-sided slaughter. 15 seconds. That was the time needed by Shueisha to completely end the combat, from unleashing his dart and then returning to Tang Xiu's front. Bam. 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 7 bodies crashed onto the floor, twitching and spurting blood for a few seconds before their life force completely ceased to exist. The thin middle-aged man clenched his fists with a pale face, a frantic killing intent burning inside his eyes. A blasting aura emanated from his body, as his glare focused on Shueisha as though he would act at any time. How is this possible? This question filled his mind because he never expected even in his wildest dreams that, in such a short time, of the 8 subordinates he personally trained, 7 of them died and 1 was injured. The Phantom Special Combat Squad members were similarly dumbfounded. After seeing those 7 people from the Stygian Club collaborating to form a battle formation, only then did they realize how formidable the opponents were. But these 7 men were unexpectedly completely destroyed by Shueisha in such a short time. Such a level of strength was undoubtedly beyond them. Is he still a human? Chen Yongfan's mouth twitched a few times. He could not bear to mutter to himself. Suddenly, he remembered back when he was in Shanghai, that ghost-like figure fellow who put a dagger on his neck. Could it be it was them from before? Instantly, Chen Yongfan's pupils contracted and his eyes quickly shifted to Tang Xiu. He knew that Tang Xiu came from China, exactly from Shanghai. At that time, that lightning-like fella also appeared in Shanghai, hence, there must be a very close relationship between these two. As he thought up to there, Chen Yangfan immediately came to his captain, Yu Shuqing, and spoke in a low voice, "It's really them, Captain." Yu Shuqing was baffled by his ambiguous, senseless words, and replied with a confused expression, "Them? What do you mean? Do you remember back when I tracked Mouse, that I had a dagger placed on my neck?" Chen Yangfan whispered. "I suspect that man is Tang Shou's man. You also saw the speed of this fella called Shui Sha. He's just way too fast." Yu Shuqing's face slightly changed, and he thought carefully. He too felt that Chen Yangfan's guess made a lot of sense. There were quite a few coincidences, and if they were to be linked up together, those people should be them. Nonetheless, what did Tang Shou need Mouse for? Did he also buy information from him? Leave this matter aside for now. Yu Shuqing felt that the aura of the thin middle-aged man was about to blast out and immediately prepared his gun, as he spoke in a low voice. Tang Shou let out a faint smile while glancing at the lean middle-aged man. Then, he immediately shot a satisfied look and nodded to Shui Sha, saying, "Good job. Has your strength improved?" "I made a slight breakthrough," said Shui Sha with a smile. "All right. You don't need to move for the next action," Tang Shou nodded. "Let the others deal with these two if they still want to act." The middle-aged man took a deep breath while suppressing his soaring killing intent inside. Then, he said, "I'm giving you a last chance, Tang Shou. You have to follow us, and if your men search for you, some of them will die. But if you still want to insist on going against us, don't blame us for being cruel and merciless. I, Tang Shou, am not afraid of threats." Tang Shou smiled. "Just bring it on if you got the ability. However, once you expose something that must not be shown before ordinary people, you can expect the matter spread very fast. By that time, you will find it difficult to conclude the ending." "Humph, no one will fucking know if the ordinary people die," said the lean middle-aged man with a blazing killing aura. As his voice faded away, the middle-aged man beside him instantly flew toward the 7 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad. Before he had yet to arrive in front Yu Shuqing, wolf teeth appeared, his eyes turned bright green, and his skin even turned darker with hairs continuously drilling out, turning him into a humanoid beast at a speed discernible to the naked eyes. A wolf. Stimulating his bloodline could make him return to his ancestor form for a short time, multiplying his strength. Tang Shou once saw a werewolf stimulating their blood and transforming into his ancestor form in Laoshan, so he did not feel strange at all. But the 7 members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad were shocked by this werewolf transformation. Even at this moment, Yu Shuqing subconsciously pulled the trigger while everyone else stood dumbfounded. Slash him. Mo's robust figure dashed in a flash and instantly released a flying sword. Right as the werewolf's sharp claws were about to smash Yu Shuqing's head, it cut the sharp claws. As blood splattered on Yu Shuqing's face, the other sharp claws of the werewolf swept over and left for bloody wounds on Yu Shuqing's chest. Roar. The figure of the thin middle-aged man had similarly changed. The clothes on his back were split, while 2 wings were opened in a flash. A sanguine crest grew on his forehead as a blazing flame suddenly blasted out from his eyes. At the same time, the feathers on his 2 wings flapped and slammed toward Tang Shou and Shui Sha. The feathers shrouded by flames turned into a rocket-like shape while violently increasing the temperature in the surroundings. Whoosh. 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 8 figures instantly appeared in front of Tang Shou, and together with Shui Sha, they unleashed their flying swords. Shadows of sword images blotted out the sky, overlapping with each other to crush and shatter the rockets in an instant. The sword chi then swiftly formed a powerful sword net as it stormed over towards the flushed, thin middle-aged man who just turned into a wingman. China's cultivators. The wingman had his face greatly changed. It was as though he had recalled something as his figure instantly retreated. When he appeared behind Mo, his wings turned into a light blade that swept toward Mo's neck. You court death. Mo's cultivation level was the highest among them except Tang Xiu. When he felt a compressed wind coming from behind, he immediately stormed forward toward the werewolf. His flying sword spun and revolved to blast the werewolf's back from Yu Shuqing and his men. Rat-tat-tat. The 7 guns' muzzles erupted, as the bullets seemed to be aimed at vital spots. Roar. The wingmen suddenly raved. He grabbed a syringe from his waist and flushed toward Mo. His 2 wings suddenly disappeared without a trace, while the sanguine crest on his forehead also dissipated. As his eyes turned greenish, hairs were drilling out of the inside of his body, while sharp claws crazily grew longer from his fingers. He, who was originally a wingman, unexpected turned into a werewolf in just a few breaths. The change was strange and uncanny. Despite his experience, Tang Xiu was still shocked and dumbfounded. A wingman turning into a werewolf? What kind of monster is this? Tang Xiu took a deep breath and flagrantly acted at this moment. He instantly unleashed the long sword floating in the world inside his dantian, as it turned into a streak of light that pierced the back of that man. Run! A howling roar came out of the pierced monster's mouth. Chapter 755, Blood Rain in the Dark Night. The monster that turned from a wingman to a werewolf suppressed its fatal injury while its tough body dashed in front of Mo. Attacking him with the intention to perish together, it frantically rushed toward Mo, whereas the other werewolf who only had his sharp claws cut off then instantly fled. Hold them back. Tang Xiu called his flying sword back in a flash and roared. Mo roared. His brutally violent punch bombarded the monster's face, though his body was also bleeding from 8 wounds caused by its sharp claws. At this moment, the flying sword he released flew back and directly slashed the monster's neck. Whoosh! Whoosh! 10 lightning-like figures chased the escaping werewolf and disappeared at the hotel entrance in the blink of an eye. The gunfire had now ceased. The captain of the Phantom Special Combat Squad, Yu Shuqing, as well as the other 6 members of the Special Force, retreated at the same time and were now leaning with their backs against the wall. Fear still lingered inside their hearts as they saw the headless corpse that fell to the floor at this moment. They had seen countless killings in their lives and were involved in numerous massacres, but never once had they ever had a thrilling and soul-shaking battle like this. Even though they were nothing but figurants at present. They are freaking monsters. Mo Xiaonan swiped the blood splattered on his face and spoke with a trembling voice. In the past, he always thought that with a gun in his hands he would never be afraid even if the devil were to appear before him. But he was scared shitless after what he just saw. Cough. Cough. They are like those werewolves in movies, and a birdman too. Yu Shuqing swiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He couldn't care less about the bleeding wound on his chest as his eyes were full of vigilance, aiming his muzzle at the hotel's front door. Tang Xiu approached Mo. After observing the wound on his chest, he immediately took out a holy healing medicine and forcefully stuffed it in his mouth, and then said in a deep voice, "Heal your injuries. It's your main task now, so take your time to heal yourself. It's highly likely that there are still many fields for us to sweep." Mo nodded without a word and went straight to the corner to sit down. Tang Xiu then went toward Yu Shuqing and said indifferently, "Treat yourselves. These divergent races from Stygian Club are not something you can deal with. Like I told you before, I don't need your protection. For you, being able to protect yourselves is already the biggest help you can provide me." Pale and blue complexions could be seen on the faces of Yu Shuqing and the other members of the Phantom Special Combat Squad. Shame now filled their hearts. Tang Xiu did say previously that he did not need their protection, while they thought that he was too arrogant and had no idea of danger nor death. But now, they finally realized that it was the other way around. These people, they were indeed not at the same rank, simply at a whole another level. Yu Shuqing and his men exchanged glances. Except for forcing out a smile and putting on a helpless face, only deep shame surged up inside their hearts. All their arrogance, pride, and self-confidence had just been blown away at this moment. Tang Xiu did not say anything more. After all, they were just ordinary people but still true warriors for the country. He gently patted Yu Shuqing's shoulder and said, Mist Source Island is now in a crisis, while the garrison base is also in the middle of a big crisis as well. I think you should stay in the compound given your abilities. As for those foreign powers on this island, you can leave them to me. Yu Shuqing fell silent for a while and then said with difficulty, all right. I'll explain the situation to Division Commander Yang and Chief of Staff Hu. We'll immediately return to the garrison as long as they give orders. No need to report to them. Tang Xiu shook his head. I will explain it to them personally. However, I hope you can help me with something. What is it? Asked Yu Shuqing quickly. Keep this matter a secret, said Tang Xiu. You must not speak of what you've seen today, and neither can you report it to your superiors. I know all of you are loyal and patriotic warriors, but you must accept this order. Yu Shuqing fell silent and no words came out of his mouth. What do you mean by that? Asked Mo Xiaonan with a complex expression. You mean, we must accept your order? A secret and confidential order? Yes, said Tang Xiu indifferently. We were only dispatched to follow your orders temporarily, said Mo Xiaonan. We have no responsibility. Tang Xiu raised his hand to interrupt him and coldly said, there were some issues I didn't want to tell you previously, but it seems like I must warn you now. The very person who sent me to Mist Source Island this time is the #1 leader of the state. Who do you think has bigger rights than this senior in the entire China? I'll tell you another thing. I would have never come to this island even if the #1 leader ordered me because my identity is what you've heard from these enemies a while ago. We are cultivators. What we pursue is strength and immortality, to be enlightened with the laws and principle of the heavenly Tao, and cultivating to sever the shackles of the profane world and link our hearts to our swords. But other than the #1 senior, it was my grandfather who personally went to my home and asked me to come here. I don't need to hide this fact from you. Tang Guisheng is my grandfather and the Tang family from Beijing is my family. Do you think it's necessary for you to report what you've encountered today? All the members of Phantom Special Combat Squad exchanged dismayed looks. They looked shocked, as it never crossed their minds that the person who sent Tang Xiu over was unexpectedly the #1 leader. And neither did they think that he was also the grandson of Tang Guisheng. No wonder. No wonder the two senior leaders sent you to solve the crisis on Mist Source Island. Maybe only you who can deal with these overseas divergent races since you're a cultivator. All right. We will treat this matter as the highest military secret, and unless we are asked by the first leader, we will never let this out of our mouths, solemnly said Yu Shuqing. Tang Xiu slightly nodded in response. Then, he said, we'll be staying here tonight for the time being. We are bogged down in crisis outside, and I'm afraid the news that we've come here is known by many forces already. If my guess is correct, we won't have a peaceful night tonight. Who are you? In the hallway, two middle-aged men wearing security uniforms came out. They were holding flashlights and looked baffled. However, when the security guard on the left asked, he suddenly screamed and said, Heavens! Murder, there are dead people here. As his voice faded away, the two men ran away with fear on their faces. They nearly exhausted all their strength before quickly disappearing into the corridor. Tang Xiu couldn't help laughing and said, you and the rest, deal with the matter here. I'm going outside to stand guard and wait for you to secure some rooms. Understood. Yu Shuqing nodded. Tang Xiu took out a cigarette, lit it up and walked out of the hotel's front door. Then, he watched the empty curtain of the night outside while his spiritual sense continued spreading toward the surroundings. Covering a scope of 500 to 600 meters was not a problem with his current ability. Nonetheless, he could not help but worry since Shui Sha and Jin Shi's group of 10 who left to pursue the werewolf had disappeared from the scope of his perception. Rest assured, boss. Jin Shi and the others will be able to escape if they encounter enemies they are no match for. They can also still use the flying swords to escape. Mo Ao had recovered. Aside from some light injuries, he was longer affected, as his previously bleeding wound was already much better. No, there's something bothering me. A bad premonition. Tang Xiu shook his head. I can't specifically explain what it is. Also, there's something strange about the fella I just killed. You mean, the guy who had characteristics of wingmen first, and then suddenly became a werewolf in the end? Asked Mo Ao.
Yeah,
said Tang Xiu. Mo Ao hesitated for a moment, and then said, I think it should have been some kind of drug, boss. Before that monster slammed me, he shot himself with a syringe. I found that there is some residual green liquid in the syringe. After killing him, I examined his corpse, and there's a slightly discernible pinhole in his lower rib, with some dark green residue in his body. That would be very interesting if it's really caused by some medicaments, said Tang Xiu crankily. A werewolf that can transform into a wingman. This shows that the Western divergent races are not in peace. Don't you think that if you really have this kind of drug, then you can have the best means to set up a trap and frame someone else after an assassination? Indeed. Mo Ao let out a hollow laugh. Suddenly, they both set their gazes in the southeast direction, because other than the 10 controlled flying swords that flew toward them, there was a chasing party behind, 4 vampires. They held an unusual weapon in their hands each while unleashing tarrying attack bombardments again and again. Aid them, oh. Tang Xiu instantly streaked up to the air and unleashed the long sword inside his body toward his fleeing men. He immediately lifted his hands and turned the long sword into 100 meters of light, as it heavily hacked toward the 4 pursuing vampires. The earth-shattering and heaven-battering sword seemed to tear open the space barrier. Countless energies came swarming in all directions as they fused into the sword image that hacked down lightning fast. In just 1/100th of a second, the might of the sword had increased several folds. Retreat. A sharp roar came out from one of the vampires. His tone was accompanied with strong panic as the 4 vampires flashed backward frantically. Whoosh. 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 Their retreating speed was very fast, but the lightning-fast chopping sword image was even faster. With a devastating momentum, it instantly smashed down the 4 vampires who brandished their uncanny weapons to prevent it. The 4 vampires were akin to a lonely boat amid the turbulent sea. They flew upside down for several hundreds of meters, spurting out blood and then smashing through several buildings while creating big holes in the process. Diabolus miasma. A vampire rushed out from the shattered building. A jet-black smog was sprinkled by him. In just a few breaths, the darkness crazily shrouded the room and covered the scenery within half a kilometer. The 4 vampires drilled themselves into the darkness and then vanished from sight. Tang Xiu frowned deeply, for he discovered that his spiritual sense was unable to pierce the black fog. He had no choice but to take back his perception and went around to another direction at an extremely fast speed, pursuing toward the spot where the 4 vampires vanished. A few minutes later, Tang Xiu returned to the hotel's front gate. He looked the distressed-looking Jing Shi and the others, and asked with knitted brows, "Do you know where these 4 vampires come from?"